And now I want to talk to you about complicated bereavement. And to start that, I want to present to you what Worden offers as an alternative to Kubler-Ross's stages. And this applies actually to simple bereavement, which is, any of you who've been through it know it's anything but simple, and complicated bereavement. And what he's done, that instead of it being a stage model, is he has built these tasks. This is how you get from remembrance with pain at the top to remembrance with love at the bottom, is that you complete these tasks. And so what he says is the first task of to move and catalyze and get to the other side of loss and grief. Another thing that I learned when I was reading that book, do you know the difference between grief and bereavement? I didn't. Bereavement is always about the loss of a person. Grief can be about the loss of anything. So it could be the loss of a job, a loss of a pet, a loss of safety, but bereavement is always about a person. So the first step of that is acceptance, that you do not get to remembrance with love while you are remaining in denial of the loss. That it requires acceptance. And what is acceptance? It's stopping fighting. It's you know, when I ask that question often in workshops, people say, well, acceptance is accepting. Like, yeah, that's perfectly tautological. We run a lot of rhetoric throw a lot of rhetoric at our clients a lot of times about coaching them how to get to acceptance. So let me give you a nice, simple, objective and concrete definition for what acceptance is. Acceptance is the ability to think about something while staying in a relaxed body. Doesn't mean you like it, doesn't mean you agree with it. It just means that it no longer produces a sympathetic nervous system response while you call it to mind. So that's a nice way to teach your clients about what acceptance is. With acceptance, then the next step of that is that we process the pain of the grief. And what's processing the pain of the grief mean? Well, it's Shrek therapy. And what does Shrek say after he belches? Better out than in. Well, that's kind of the same truth for grief. Better out than in. So what we want to facilitate when we're working with folks is this externalization that they need to bring forward, their internal processes, and allowing that to come forward, sharing it with another human being is how it metabolizes and we get to the other side of it. Continuing to retroflect and doing that intrapersonally, it stays stuck. And we want to catalyze and help folks to move it so that we invite and elicit from them this material forward. The third task is borrowed from Therese Rando's work, if you're familiar with her work on loss accommodation. And what this means is that we are accommodating the loss, that we are no longer leaving the gaping hole in our lives, and we're beginning to go to the store without our partner. We're beginning to take walks without our pet. We're beginning to show up in public after we've been fired. It's the re-engagement and beginning to fill the holes in our life of where we have a dry socket, and no longer being just avoidant of that, of re-engaging. And then the final task of mourning, to get to remembrance with love instead of pain, is, I just love this, I just think this is really organic. It is, instead of, you think about the last stage, you know, intuitively, the last stage is the wrong word, the last task would be goodbye. But what Worden's saying is, no, 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 no. The last task is not goodbye, it's hello. It is having worked through enough of this other stuff, enough of the pain, that we can now tolerate an intrapsychic presence of the person that we love, that we can have their voice and their countenance with us, and that they produce now a sense of support and comfort, instead of there's still so much pain that every time we call them to mind that we have to suppress and turn away from them. We've worked through enough that they now live on with us, and we are now beginning to develop a relationship with them that is non-corporeal, that it is a relationship with them in the spirit world, in the intrapsychic world. And I just think that's cool. That's pretty neat way of looking at what health is. So that's how you get to remembrance with love instead of pain. Now, let's apply this to complicated bereavement. And what I want to do is I want to walk you in the next 5 minutes or so through a different way of looking at complicated bereavement, something a way you've probably never looked at it before. And the way I want to do this with you is I'm going to ask you to think about a significant loss that you've had in your life. And I want you to think about the morning after that loss. About waking up and coming to awareness for the first moment that the loss had happened the previous day. And I want you to think about, at the moment that you came to awareness that the loss had happened the previous day, I want you to think about what happened in your bodies. And what you'll remember is that there was an uptick in energy. That's what loss is, a wound. And the way that human beings heal loss is that it produces an energy wave. What grief is an energy wave. And it increases the energy in your body, and it increases for a few seconds to a few minutes until it reaches crescendo. And at crescendo, it's usually tearfulness. And we cry for a few seconds to a few minutes. And once that's been once that's been expressed, then the energy dissipates and it drops back down. And we go over the wave and we get to the other side. And then a few seconds to a few minutes to a few hours passes, and then until we remember it again. And we remember the loss again. And what happens is the second time we remember it, the same thing happens. But if you look at the slide there, what happens is it's a little bit less in intensity. If we stayed in a relaxed body when we first remembered it, when we first encountered the loss, and then after the first remembrance, if we each of those times stayed in a relaxed body and just let that wave move through us, then the subsequent times that we encounter it, the wave is a little bit less in intensity and it's a little bit shorter in duration. It still happens, but it's less intense. And, presently, in a few days to a few weeks, what's happening is that it's diminished. It still hurts, but it's tolerable now. And it's becoming more melancholic than it is acute. And that person is well on their way to remembering with love instead of pain. They've got more work to do. I'm not saying it's done yet, but this is how you get there, is that you allow it to happen. This is the organic way that people heal grief. This is what our bodies do to self-repair after the wound of loss. But now think about with me, what's been your learning history in your early developmental experiences with your family of origin, with your early media experiences, with your early peer experiences? What did you learn about loss? And what did you learn about the subsequent feeling of grief in your bodies? Because that's what it is. Grief is a feeling in your body. What did you learn about those two things in your early developmental experiences? What most of us learned is we learn to perceive loss and then the subsequent feeling of grief in our bodies as a threat. And so what happens is when we encounter loss, and then subsequently as the grief begins to attempt to heal itself, which is what this wave of energy is, what happens is the energy comes up, we get scared, we perceive this rise of energy in our bodies as a threat, and we constrict. And when we constrict with this process, what we don't let it do is we don't let it finish. It doesn't get over the hump. We constrict and suppress. Does it stay suppressed? Nope. It pops back up. And what's happening now is the bereaved is playing whack-a-mole. Is that the memory, the feeling of loss is coming up, and the person's whacking it back down. They're constricting and suppressing it. And it comes back up and it's suppressed. Up, suppressed. – There's complicated bereavement. 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 – There's com And what does a person who's been doing that who's been coping with their loss that way for 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, what do they look like? What's that do to a person? There is a map on the screen of hopelessness, of bereft, that the only meaning that the person's going to be able to make from that is there's something wrong with me. You know, it's been 2 years, I ought to be over this by now. How many of you have ever seen somebody who has complicated bereavement in your office? What is their presentation? What's their mood and affect? It's almost always depressed mood and flat affect, isn't it? But you watch that person who's sitting in your office, think about, now retroflect on that and think about it, and they will have that flat affect, slumped shoulders, you know, just kind of mopey, but you'll also see that there is added to that, there's psychomotor agitation. They'll be wringing their hands, their legs are gone, they're rocking. You got psychomotor agitation and you got consciousness squatting down on top of it. That's not depression. That's rumination. It's the fancy psychodynamic word for it. Is you got something trying to come out that's pushing on consciousness, and you got consciousness in its fear squatting down on top of it. That's a petri dish for symptoms, for psychopathology. I wonder if you guys have any ideas about how that might heal. I'm sorry that it's that simple. I wish I had a more complex algorithm for you, but yeah, it is that simple. Is that we teach our clients how to get and keep their muscles and their body relaxed, because what they have not done yet, ever, somebody that has complicated bereavement, what they have not done yet is they have not been able to call up this loss, and they have not been able to allow that grief to move through them in a relaxed body. Every time it comes up, there is constriction. What Francine Shapiro taught me with EMDR, and I've done 7,000 or 8,000 sessions of EMDR, and so I have become a believer, is that we live in self-healing organisms. You cut yourself, your skin heals. You get a disease, your white blood cells do its business and get rid of that disease. You get an emotional hurt and your system heals itself. We have adaptive resolution. But a system can't heal itself. Repair, healing is not important when a person is constantly in their threat response system. When a person is constantly in their threat response system, healing and repair goes on the back burner, and survival is a priori. It is always the agenda du jour, is that I've got to survive this, and they're staying constantly in their threat response system. What we got to help them to do is to get some airtime in conscious wakefulness. We need to help them to be in a parasympathetically dominant nervous system so that this system can get busy doing what it's been trying to do since the day they experienced the loss, which is to heal itself. But in their fear, they are thwarting that system from healing itself. So what do? Well, we do two things. We help them to affect desensitization. And what is desensitization? Well, it's reciprocal inhibition. It's exposure paired with relaxation. It's real simple. You see, it's anything but easy, but it's simple. And that's what your client who has complicated bereavement has not done yet, is they have not confronted the memory of this loss in a relaxed body. And so I want to teach them about their autonomic nervous system, and I want to teach them how to get and keep the muscles in their body relaxed. So there's half of the problem, the solution to the problem, the desensitization. The other half is that we need to do the integration, because your client's been suppressing or repressing this memory, and it's been continuing to try to get integrated. And consciousness is working against this attempt to integrate the splinter, and consciousness is not letting it come forward. So what do we do with that? Well, We got to get it into words. We help our clients to be able to narrate their loss, to turn the loss into a narrative. And in the grief and bereavement world, that's usually called a eulogy. So the way that I do that with my clients is I'd say, I'd like for you to keep the muscles in your body relaxed and tell me all that was lost when your son was killed in that car accident. What did you lose? What did you lose when your mother died? All of the physical things and all the ephemeral things. Would you please keep the muscles in your body relaxed and share that with me? And what do you see happen across from you? If somebody's 7 years out and they've had complicated bereavement for 7 years and they keep the muscles in their body relaxed and they start sharing that, what do you see? You see 7 years of pain come forward. And it's not dainty, kind of dabbing at the ears, dabbing at the eyes tearfulness. A lot of times it is, it's just this upswell of pain. To which my response is a warm countenance and nodding, because there's nothing wrong here. Your client is not having an abreaction. They're not in any danger. It's just this stuff coming forward. It is expectorating that which has kind of become infected. And what you'll see with a whole lot of clients is they'll start that and then they'll do this. I've seen it a lot. To which I say what? The simple prompt of breathe. And I'll say, breathe, soften, and they'll go, and I'll say, breathe, soften, and that goes on for 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, and then it'll dissipate. They've made it the first time over the wave. They've not yet done this, and they get all the way over to the other side. And, once all this is over and your clients look back and you're done with it, they'll say, that was really weird because that felt good. It's the resistance to it that feels bad. Once they kind of bring that forward, there's not pain there anymore. That's relief. That's what's important for you to remember, is they're getting relief when that's coming forward. They're not in pain there. They're in relief there. The pain is in how much they're constricting against it. And so what you'll see is that, once that energy dissipates the first time, they'll pick up a tissue and they'll blow their nose. And let me just say a word about mucus on faces. I promise you, you are in no danger when you see your client having mucus hanging off of their face. You do not need to shove a Kleenex in front of them. When you are working with trauma and you're working with grief, it is important for you to be interested, not interesting. So I don't want to do anything that draws attention to me, including shoving Kleenexes or water in my client's face. What I want to do is I want to keep a warm countenance, and I want to be present with them and let them say whatever they need to say. And a lot of times, once they go through that first wave and they blow their nose and they take a bottle of water, and they'll look at you a little bit goggle-eyed and they'll say, "Oh my God, what was that? What just happened?" Oh, and another wave comes. But what's cool about that second wave is that it is significantly lower in intensity. It is shorter in duration. And when it's multiple years out, sometimes it takes more than one session for your client to walk through this. But each time, what you see, it is dissipating. And we've completed what's happening in that process. And I just think this is kind of cool, is nothing's broken. What we're doing is that we're just helping our clients to restart their system's ongoing attempt to heal itself, that in their fear they did not allow. They never have allowed. For years, they've not allowed this system to complete what it's been trying to do. It's been constantly bringing this material forward, and it's been perseverating. And the person in their fear has been suppressing it, and it doesn't stop perseverating. And that's a beautiful thing. Healing doesn't give up on us, is it keeps coming. And I think it's important that you language some of this with your clients, is that there's nothing wrong with you. You're just afraid. Let's get your fear out of the way so that your system knows exactly how to heal itself. And so, how do you heal complicated bereavement? Well, that looks familiar, doesn't it? We build and maintain supportive relationships, because your client will not go into this process with somebody that they don't have a good therapeutic relationship with. We teach them to be in a relaxed muscle body, and we help them to, in that relaxed muscle body, tell the story of what was lost. That's how you help cure complicated bereavement. And I'll say one more little coda on that. For a lot of clients that I work with, they have a lot of grief, a lot of loss around a contentious relationship. A lot of times their perpetrator, when their perpetrator dies, they get all kind of, it gets all gnarled up. And I want to first of all make sense of that how many shared experiences have you had with your perpetrator? And even though they were painful and that you were hurt and exploited, there's still a significant connection there. And when the connection is no more, there's loss there. Now, I get it that you're probably not going to be wanting to remember your perpetrator with love. But what we want to have happen is we want to allow that to him or her staying flat in your past, so it's not intruding anymore. So part of that is, part of the telling of the story is you need to bring forward whatever it is that needs to be said, that whatever's rumbling around in there that needs to come out, let that come on forward, so that it gets processed instead of choked down. Externalization. So that's a little bit different slant when you're working with somebody that has a conflicted relationship. And what we've just done is really good cognitive behavioral therapy. We've done exposure paired with relaxation and turning it into a narrative. That's CBT, but hopefully you just saw CBT done with a heart and with a soul.